morning. So I think you guys already know who Senator Brown is, but I get to give a little bit of an introduction. So Senator Brown was first elected in Ohio back in 2006, and he's been representing this swing state, tough state to win, a must-win state since then. And interesting things about Senator Brown's background: he was one of the original votes against the first NAFTA and has been pursuing Wall Street reforms for the benefits of consumers for quite a while. He's refused on principle to accept the congressional health care until the Affordable Care Act, on a belief that really the American people deserve the same kind of health care that he would be getting in Congress. And I know we all appreciate that. Long-standing champion for civil rights, for voting rights. Please help us welcome this morning Senator from the state of Ohio, Senator Sherrod Brown. Thanks for joining us.
Madam Chair, it's an honor to be here. And among some of you I know, Jason did a terrific job with impeachment, as you know. It was great fun watching the talent coming from the House. Ed Perlmutter and Diana DeGette have been longtime friends. I don't know if Michael's on this call, Michael Bennett, but Michael is, as many of you know, one of the best thinkers, serious thinkers about how we support working families in this country. We've done a lot of work on earned income tax credit and child tax credit. So thank you for that. And Ms. Vinson, thanks for inviting me. And Madam Chair, thank you for your good work in public service in the legislature, in the House and Senate, and your work there and your work as state chair. This election is, it goes down to one question. And I know that that when you think about your governor soon to be elected to the Senate, he understands this. We've had a number of talks, John and I have. We did a remote event for him with a number of Ohio people. And he understands politics. It's whose side are you on? And in this election, that is so clear. You also know if we don't win the Senate race in Colorado, we don't win the Senate. I mean, Megan's shirt sort of showed that you've got to win this seat for us to flip the Senate. I think we're going to do it. I think you're going to do it. I think we're going to win at least 5 or 6 seats that were absolutely in play, some of which didn't look in play some time ago. But this 4 years ago, people, the whose side are you on question, enough people were convinced it was Trump because of his phony populism to make people feel like he was on their side. And fundamentally, he betrayed them. He betrayed workers. He betrayed the public trust. He betrayed our healthcare system, his attacks on the Affordable Care Act, the way he has so mismanaged the coronavirus. 170,000 people have died. Putting that in perspective, I think you've heard this number that we're 4% of the world's population. We're 25 almost percent of the world's deaths. I put it another way. Back in March was the last time I got on an airplane. I'm able to drive back and forth to Washington. It's about 6 hours. And the last time I was on an airplane was in March. And I went back and looked at sort of the state of things in March, and the United States and the country of South Korea each had about 95 deaths at that point. Since then, South Korea has lost about 200 more people. We've lost 170,000. Their unemployment rate is under 4%. Ours is 3 times that. That's not because Korea has better doctors than Denver or Aurora or Boulder, Colorado. It's because of the terribly incompetent, mean-spirited job that the President of the United States has done. We saw the perhaps the most powerful story, I think, of the first 2 days of the convention. We were talking ahead of time. Some of you were not yet on how great it was. The roll call, I thought, was the most poignant moment in a convention in years. But I thought the most powerful story was the young woman in Arizona whose father was taken by this virus, and the president had said it's safe to go out and go to bars, and she said, this young lady talking about her dad said his only pre-existing condition was trusting Donald Trump. And there are tens of thousands of hundreds and hundreds of families in Colorado and in my state of Ohio, tens of thousands across the country. And we know Trump is going to distract from their grief and all his failures with his racism and with his division. But stoking fear and placing blame, it worked 4 years ago, but it's not going to work this time. People see the way Trump's betrayed them. He took overtime pay from 100,000 people in my state, almost 5 million across the country. He continues to attack the Affordable Care Act. You have hundreds of thousands of people getting insurance now because of the Affordable Care Act that didn't get it before. He wasted trillions on a tax cut that Ed and Jason and Diana and Michael and I all voted against because it was a giveaway to the richest people in the country. And just 2 weeks ago, we took away unemployment compensation. You think about what this means. In my state, there are 680,000 people 2 weeks ago that were getting $600 a week. There aren't jobs for these people. There aren't jobs for the hundreds, thousands of people in Colorado out of work. But like that, they don't have their $600 a week. What are they to do to pay their rent? What are they to do to feed their families? What are they to do just to get along? And McConnell doesn't care. Trump doesn't care. Cory Gardner surely doesn't care. Cory Gardner's job right now should be going to Mitch McConnell and say, Mitch, damn it, you got to bring us back into session. You've got to pass unemployment extension. You've got to provide money to public schools so they can open safely. They're getting no help from the federal government. Any school person, and some of you as delegates are school people, know how expensive it's going to be. It is to open these schools. No help for emergency rental assistance. Cory Gardner's not doing his job because he's not going to Mitch McConnell and demanding that. So, but we're not just running this race against Trump. We're showing the American people our vision to build a better country and a fairer economy, just like Barack Obama inherited at that point the worst economy since the Depression, and had to spend his first 2-3 years building back, pulling out of that hole. Joe Biden's going to inherit even a worse economy this year and going to have to do the same. So we're going to aim higher. We're going to think bigger. We're going to address the three major moral issues of our time: climate change, racial disparities, income and wealth inequality. We're going to build a better system centered on the dignity of work. And we talk about the dignity of work, contrasting that with Trump's betrayal of workers. And that's a contrast we can't say enough. Let me close, and I want to tell you a little story from about 3 years ago. I guess it was 2.5 years ago. It was January 2018, and at that point, I didn't know Kamala Harris very well. She had been in the Senate a year. We were not on the same committees, and I'd gotten to know her, but not really well. And she ended up coming out to the state a bunch of times doing stuff in Ohio with me. And but we're sitting on the Senate floor, and it was the week of Martin Luther King's holiday celebrations, and this was like Wednesday or Thursday. And she said, we were talking about what kind of speech we gave at the Martin Luther King breakfast and in our states or commemoration celebrations. And I talked about how I sort of patterned my speeches after Dr. King's dignity of work. That Dr. King, that you may know the quote that I will bungle here. I apologize. Dr. King was talking about street sweepers sweeping streets the way Michelangelo did his paintings and Beethoven composed music. And when a street sweeper does that, the heavens open up and say, my, what a fine street sweeper. So Kamala and I were talking about this. The next week, she shows up, she walks over to me on the floor, and she gave me a book. The name of the book was All Labor Has Dignity. And it was a compilation of King's speeches from about 1958 or 9 through his assassination. And you know where he was when he was assassinated and what he was doing. He was fighting for the most exploited workers, some of the most exploited workers in our country, African-American sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee. And it was that fight that ended up in his assassination. And you know, it's what's so appealing to me is that Dr. King understood so well the intersection between worker rights and civil rights, and that's who we really are as a party. And that's why I think I see Kamala and Joe both campaigning through the eyes of workers. They'll govern through the eyes of workers, but they can't get there without you. And if you love your country, you fight for the people who make it work. I know Colorado Democrats will do that. We have to win your state. My states get a little harder every year. I think your state's getting a little better every year. So we got to win your state for the presidency. We got to win your state for the Senate. We're all counting on it. And last thing I'll ask you to do, and ask every activist you know to do this. I say this in every campaign I've run the last 20 years, or even when I'm not on the ballot. I ask every activist to identify 5 people whom they know from work, from school, from your family, from church, from your neighborhood. Find 5 people and make sure they're people that are just not really very interested in politics. Make sure they're registered. Make sure you either help them absentee vote or help them get them to early voting. Make sure they vote. make sure they're educated. If all the activists in our states go out and get 5 people, will make a huge difference. So I'll close there and just say thank you for all the work you're doing as great activists in the great state of Colorado. Thanks so much.
Senator, thank you so much for joining us. We're really honored to have you in Colorado. Find 5. Love it. So this will be part of our peer-to-peer, where we all identify our non-Trump loving friends and family and coworkers, get them registered and get them out to vote. Thank you for your service to our country, and we're honored to have you this morning.
Senator, when I worked for David Skaggs and Mark Udall, we thought you were a Colorado senator. We heard your name so much from both of them that we figured you were living here, not in Ohio.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
An honorary Coloradan.
Thank you. I'll take that anytime. I was a single parent for many years, and my daughters and I used to take a train trip out west, and we went to Rocky Mountain National Park one time, and we stopped at a Rockies game, and then we rented a car and went out to Colorado to Rocky Mountain National Park. It was great fun. That was a long time ago. That was 20 years ago.
Well, anyway. We'd love to see you back when COVID.
All right, for sure. Thanks, everybody. It was just a pleasure to do it. Thanks,
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Benson. Thank you.
Next speaker this morning probably needs no introduction among this crew, but was part of a historic flip on a seat that we have been trying to flip for a long time. Congressman Jason Crow, coming from the 6th Congressional District, flipped that seat just 2 years ago. And in just 2 years period of time, he took that from a red seat to having moved that to a much bluer seat by doing constituent outreach, by actually helping people, by being responsive to the issues that are coming up in the community, by defending veterans and immigrants and families on gun safety issues. We all saw Congressman Crow represent the country so nobly for us during the impeachment of Donald Trump for his high crimes and misdemeanors. And we saw dignity and grace and force in our own congressman in the 6th Congressional District. He has walked his walk on servant leadership. We've all heard him talk about it, but he really does put that into action for how he represents us in the 6th Congressional District and really all of us in Colorado, in the country. So I am going to turn it over to our congressman from the 6th Congressional District, Congressman Jason Crow.
Wow, thanks, Morgan. I appreciate that. That's it. I don't know what else to say. I could just sit here and sip my coffee after that introduction. That was so good. It's always tough following Sherrod Brown, which I've almost never done, but it's going to be hard. You'd be hard pressed to find a greater advocate in the U.S. Congress for organized labor, somebody who has for decades just been a stalwart behind organized labor and American workers than Sherrod, and how he talks about it as an example for all of us, because you almost never see him give a speech or talk about something without talking about organized labor and just beating that drum, which is just so important. So thanks to Sherrod and Morgan and to the executive committee and everybody on this Zoom. You have all done an amazing job of navigating this very difficult situation, of doing the caucuses, keeping the primaries going, putting together this delegation under unprecedented circumstances. So thank you for doing so great, and keep it up. And then Howard, great job last night. I don't know where your kids shop for clothes, but I love it.
He can take that out on his own. I want to wear a Jason Crow shirt.
It was great. No, I want to just get down to brass tacks here. I don't want to preach to the choir to this group, because this group, I think, knows what's at stake. You guys live and breathe and eat this stuff. I just want to talk about just kind of the nuts and bolts of what I think is going to happen or could happen here. First off, I think I'm very nervous about this election for a couple of reasons, and I'll tell you why. Number one, complacency and getting comfortable. I've started to see some elements of comfort and complacency, much like I saw in the lead up to 2016. People saying, well, we're going to win this. Look at the polling. Who's going to be in what position? What's the cabinet going to look like? Stop. stop. We can't be doing this. We've got to win this race, right? And this is going to be tough for a bunch of reasons. Number one, I don't trust the polling. I don't think we know how to poll in the era of Donald Trump yet. I think we underpoll Trump supporters. I think those who traditionally vote for President Trump don't respond to polls. They still don't admit that they support the president in many cases, and his supporters are lower propensity voters in some cases that aren't the type of people that sit on polls. So don't trust the polling. Number two, we know this president, and he's already done it. He's already doing it. He's going to try to sabotage the election and suppress the vote. So we're going to see voter suppression and election sabotage going on. And number three, one of the biggest advantages that we normally have, and that is our get out the vote, our grassroots support, is going to be lessened because of the coronavirus. So we're not going to have as big of an advantage getting out there and doing the mega canvases. Now, we're going to do it to some degree. We're not exactly sure what it's going to look like. We're going to figure it out, but it's going to be different. So we're not going to have as much of that advantage. So for all those reasons, we just can't take it for granted. Now, what happens if Trump wins? What if he gets reelected? Immediately, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see the last of the remaining civil servants, those who have been able to survive in DOJ and Department of State and Department of Education, either leave of their own accord or be fired and replaced with incompetent loyalists. So we're going to see a very rapid disintegration of our government in a weaponization of all of these agencies and departments. And we will lose our government as we know it completely. And then, of course, we're also going to see the world finally turning away from us, because what we can explain to the rest of the world now as an aberration in our politics, if he wins re-election, we can't explain that. And they're going to turn from us and move elsewhere. And the world will look a very different place. It would be a very dangerous place. So the alternative is we win. So what do we do? Let's just think for a minute what our priorities should be. Not everyone knocking on wood right now, if we're able to get this done. I'm a long believer in the structural elements to democracy, right? We have to look at, in my very short time in Congress, as we fight for climate change, gun violence, universal health care, prescription drug reform, all of these things, what has become so clear to me is we're not doing big things anymore. We're not doing bold, ambitious, and big things because of the structural problems and impediments to democracy. The biggest of those, of course, is campaign finance reform. So that has to be our priority. Before we do any of these policy prescription issues on healthcare, guns, environment, we have to hit the structural elements. We need comprehensive campaign finance reform. We need to clean up dark money. We need to close the loopholes to super PACs and unaccountable money, start overturning Citizens United, having public financing of campaigns. We need to end gerrymandering, right? Have a redistricting system like we have in Colorado. We need to have ethics reform to stop the revolving door in our government. And then we need to expand mail-in voting, basically do for the rest of the country what we've already done successfully in Colorado. If we do those four things, our government and our politics will look radically different. And we will be able to do all of those other things, right? Because the special interests and all the other things that prevent us from having this massive reform will be addressed. So our first order of business has to be the structural democratic reforms. And that's why I'm going to continue to work with John Sarbanes and others for HR 1 to get that done. Last is we have to rebalance the separation of powers. What has become really clear under this administration is that many of the things that we take for granted, that we've taken for granted under Republican and Democratic administrations, are just norms. They're norms and traditions that Republicans and Democrats just followed. There are no laws that say Trump can't do something. So what we have to look at is what are those things that we need to codify? What are those norms and traditions that now have been thrown out the window that need to be codified so there are actually laws and some guardrails in place? Similarly, Congress has to retake its power. The other thing that's become abundantly clear is that the separation of powers is out of whack. The executive has been given too much power over too many decades, right? And the two greatest examples of that are war powers and immigration, right? So there's a reason why we're now at 20 years of these endless wars, and that's because Congress has given these blank checks and these authorizations for use of military force to the executive branch. That's, by the way, been used under Republicans and Democrats, under W, under Obama, and now under Trump. It's time we take it back. We got to end these AUMFs. We got to reassert congressional authority on war-making issues so that we have a national conversation about what we should be doing and what we should not. Same thing with immigration. We have kind of given a blank check on executive branch determining the level of refugee admissions, for example. It's time that Congress go back to the INA and retake some of those powers and rebalance the separation of powers in our government. So, Colorado, and I'm going to look at my time. Am I almost done, Morgan? I'll wrap it up.
Sure.
I'm going to wrap it up really quick. Obviously, we know this is a battle for the soul of the nation. I'd recommend you all go back and read one of the most important essays and speeches that I actually reference. Representing the most diverse district in Colorado, I often reference this essay/speech written by Frederick Douglass called "Composite Nation." Go back and read it. Frederick Douglass, "Composite Nation." He paints this beautiful picture of what makes America great. Why we are great, because we are a composite nation of immigrants and refugees and different people and from different backgrounds. And it's sometimes messy, right? It's sometimes difficult, but we are better and stronger and more resilient because of it. So go back and read that essay. It's inspiring. It's a great vision for who we are as a state, for who we are as a community, and why we need to get this done. So let's get it done. We need to flip the Senate. We need to beat my opponent. And keep the House and move forward. So thanks, everybody. Sorry for going late, Morgan.
Thank you, Congressman, so much for joining us and for everything you're doing to make our state and our country a better place. We're lucky. Time now to flip the third and keep picking up some seats and make sure we reelect Congressman Crow. So Colorado has to be pretty awesome, because wait till you check out who our next speaker is that we have joining us this morning for the Colorado Convention. So joining us this morning is Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Texas has a bazillion congressional districts compared to us. She comes from the 18th congressional district. Can you guys imagine? 18th congressional district. She's in her 11th term, which means she knows how to get stuff done. And that has been recognized. She has seen the importance majorities would make in Congress. Think about that. Over 11 terms, majorities, minority, really with an eye to obviously what it's going to take in order to deliver the election win, so that not all their amazing work dies in Mitch McConnell's graveyard over in the Senate. She's been leading on criminal justice reform for quite a while, and is also unique in her role serving on counterterrorism based on the committee she's serving in. She's been committed to meaningful and humane immigration reform for quite a while, and it's time that we help her get that over the finish line. She's an attorney by background, and she has been named top 10 most influential legislators by U.S. News and World Report. So I think we're ready to see Texas become a swing state. We need some help on redistricting to make sure the people of Texas actually have a voice and a vote.
Yes, right. Okay, he just went back into surgery. So
I know we got someone just on a mute there for a little bit, but I just want to say that we are going to be tipping Texas for Biden and Harris this cycle, and helping us with our work to flip the United States Senate. Please help us welcome from the state of Texas, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Thank you for joining us, Congresswoman. We need to get you unmuted.
Here I am.
Good morning.
Good morning, Colorado Democrats. What a dynamic and outstanding group of Democrats. I'm excited to be here. Let me just say that my dear friend, John Robert Lewis, who often called all of us the beloved community, reminded us that he was tired of being beat, tired of being arrested, and what he wanted simply was his freedom now. His mentor, Dr. Martin Luther King, said to us some many years ago, "Why we can't wait." And so I thought this morning I would offer to the great Colorado Democrats, and thank you, Morgan, for your great leadership. And wasn't it exciting to see Howard last night in that beautiful landscape? Absolutely exciting. And thank you for the great leadership of the indigenous people, Native Americans, whom I have supported from the moment I came to the United States Congress. What a beautiful state. Thank you as well for your outstanding congressional delegation. We just heard from Jason Crow. We know Senator Bennett. We know Diane DeJette and Brother Perlmutter. And of course, my dear new friend, Congressman Neguse, all great leaders in this Congress. And so I think what I would offer today is the theme of wanting our freedom now and why we can't wait. I think Colorado knows that the nation is on a broken road. And if I could sing, I would land you with that country song, On a Broken Road. But I'm going to speak to it this morning on the basis of our facts. I hold in my hand something that I think was intended, if we were to go to Milwaukee, a bandana, which would have provided the mask that now most of America are wearing. It's a Democratic one as well. I hope you all can see that. And then I hold in my hand the Constitution of the United States as a senior member of the Judiciary Committee, and having led the Criminal Justice Committee over the years and having led a Transportation Security Committee, I know the challenges of a democracy. And what we have seen in the past 3 years, now going on 4 years, as a block by block dismantling of this very precious book. We have seen documented evidence that Russians skewed the 2016 election in many ways, and they skewed it toward the present president of the United States of America, never to be acknowledged by this administration. In fact, Russia is actively engaged in skewing the election again toward President Donald Trump. Director Mueller documented the obstruction of justice. It just seems that the American people couldn't grab onto it at that time. But the administration engaged in at least 7 to 12 items of obstructing justice. Why do I know? Sitting as a member of the Judiciary Committee, I can assure you that we did our homework. And then you have a president that has turned upside down the high moral ground. As someone who is engaged internationally on the European Parliament, I saw the admiration on the principles, the positive principles of this nation. And yet our friends are wondering around the world, who now do we have to look to? And as you well know, Texas is a hotspot of COVID-19. In fact, all that I've done since coming back is to be out in my district, feeding people or having them get tested, and also getting calls of friends who have died. You've done it across America. And so we know the nation needs healing. And if we had a leader in the White House, if we had a pandemic office that had not been dismantled as it had been put in place by the Obama-Biden campaign, we would have been able to construct a national policy of testing and mask wearing and otherwise. But clearly what I want to say is, who are the healers? Are Democrats who understand we cannot take this campaign for granted, who see that we are the only remaining living human beings that can save America. We're the only ones that can say to America, you want your freedom now, or we're going to be on the front line.
That's right.
I stood next to Joe Biden some many years ago. That is the privilege of being in the United States Congress for a while. And we stood next to each other, not knowing our destinies, fighting as he introduced the Violence Against Women Act, which we have introduced over and over again. And I had the privilege of rewriting in the last 2 sessions, one of the most innovative, progressive Violence Against Women Act, now sitting in the graveyard in the Senate. I met Kamala Harris as she walked into the United States Senate, knowing her before, but working with her, and have seen her passion for women, incarcerated women, people who have been products of mass incarceration, bail reform, where just because you don't have money in your bank account, your ticket calls you to be in jail and someone else can walk out of jail. I know America needs healing. I'm infused with the knowledge of that healing. And I know that even in Colorado, we must look to places where you as Democrats can show people of racial diversity that institutional racism and systemic racism will not be the call of the day. We will recognize that everyone stands equal under the sun. And so let me say to you that I join with Jason Crow, my dear friend, as we made a major contribution to the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. What a heinous murder on the streets of America. When I asked General Barr, did he know what systemic racism was? Did he understand what happened to George Floyd? He couldn't seem to grapple with it. He said it was shocking. I said, no, it wasn't shocking. It was a murder. And so as well, Jason Crow and I introduced a legislation that I'd been working on dealing with law enforcement trust and integrity that deals with excessive force, de-escalation, and the duty to reform, duty to acknowledge something had happened. And I just want to say to you, thank you, Jason, because Elijah McClain should not have died on the streets of Aurora, and little girls and their aunt should not have been laying on a hot sun on the streets of Aurora. My heart was broken. We have to fix the idea of policing, reimagine it. And as the vice chair of the Progressive Caucus, I take no back seat to being engaged at the table as the co-sponsor of the unity package of Biden and Sanders. I take no back seat. But we must know that Elijah's mother is mourning, just like George Floyd's daughter and brothers and sisters, just like Tamir Rice's mother and Walter Brown's mother, Walter Scott's mother, and Michael Brown's mother, just like Trayvon Martin's mother, Eric Garner's mother, Sandra Bland's mother. And that mourning must be healed by us. So what do I say Democrats must do? We must take the boy from Troy, John Robert Lewis, and his essay on the day of his funeral, written by him. We must take hope and pierce it into the souls of voters who are confused and who have said, nothing I do makes a difference. So when you go out to get voters, and that is virtually, or if we ever get an opportunity to be out, you must pierce into them that this election is not about you. It is not about Biden and Harris. It is about them. And they must understand that if they leave their vote on the table, they have not voted for themselves. They have not voted for yet unborn children. They have not voted for grandma. They have not voted for their loving children and grandchildren, their next door neighbor, their disabled person, their LGBTQ, their vast diversity of this land. And so as I come to you, I said a nation is on a broken road. That road can only be directed and corrected by those who sit to listen to me today and those who will hear tomorrow the greatness of America. And my challenge to you as you go out, join with Senator Brown and get those 5 people, but you have got to get them to understand, vote for yourself. Let it be the hope in you and the hope for the nation. Let them know that Democrats do not serve themselves. They take their power and they give it to the people. And they want the people's economic opportunities to rise. They want their education to rise. They want their healthcare to rise. And they want their quality of life to rise. So I thank you for the graciousness of allowing me to be here. America is on a broken road. And I hope one day as we elect Vice President Biden and Kamala Harris as the next president and Vice President of the United States of America, we'll be able to sing that song, not that we shall overcome, that we'll be able to say we have overcome, and the nation will celebrate this great happening on November 4th, 2020. Thank you, my friends.
Hey! Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us and for sticking with this path to justice we have to create. You've given us a lot to think about this morning and inspired us, and we hope that your vision becomes a reality starting November 4th of this year if we do our part. Thank you so much for joining us. You're doing an amazing job, and we really appreciate you joining us.
I feel like I've gone to church. I've gone to church. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thank you, you great elected official and Madam Speaker and everything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Lee.
Yay!
You and Barbara Lee are my favorites.
Love you both. We're both from Texas, everybody. Help us turn Texas blue. Whoa,
Texas
we're from
needs to go blue. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Go blue, please.
Woo. Speaking of Texas, that we need to flip blue, right? Somebody
Yes.
posted it hasn't gone blue since 1976 for Carter. So we're going to make that change this cycle. But
Dang.
I told you Colorado is like the VIP stuff, and Halisi rocks in helping pull everybody together on this. Our next speaker is Congressman Al Green from Texas's 9th Congressional District. Congressman Green has served as president of the Houston branch of the NAACP for the past 10 years. He also earned his law degree on his path to Congress, and he went to the Thurgood Marshall School of Law. That's a good school of law to be from if you're trying to pursue justice and make the world a better place. He served as a justice of the peace, which is kind of a Texas version of judges, for what I understand, for 26 years. So he's had stages of multiple careers on pursuing justice and before he even came to Congress. He was the first member of Congress to call for the impeachment of Trump, the very first one. And guess what? 199 other members would eventually join him of like, yeah, this is really bad. This is high crimes and misdemeanors. He is begging for impeachment, basically, if we hadn't seen it by then. With a commitment to health care for everyone and a track record of fighting for civil rights, please help us welcome Congressman Al Green from Texas's 9th Congressional District. Yay.
Well, thank you for sharing your smile with me this morning. Thank you for the great introduction. And I can candidly say that after such a great introduction, I can hardly wait to hear myself. You have been so kind. I have had one experience in Colorado. I have a fear of heights, and I went to Colorado to climb a mountain. It was thought that if I did so, I would overcome my fear of heights. Well, I can assure you that I did make it to the summit, and I made it back down. But I can also assure you that if you should find your way to this mountain, you will find my fingerprints in granite. Because I assure you, it was not an easy climb. And unfortunately, I still have my fear of heights. But Colorado is a great state. And thank you for having me this morning. I'm honored to speak to you. And I'd like to speak to you very candidly in a very sober way, because there's some very serious issues that we have to confront. And I want to bring some of them to the forefront under a general topic of invidious discrimination. So let me start with this. I love my country. I love it. I don't have any reasons that would cause me to say this to you and not say it in other venues. I say it in venues when I speak to audiences that are predominantly African American, predominantly Anglo, predominantly of Asian ancestry. I say it, I love my country. I love it because of and in spite of. I love it in spite of the fact that I'm a son of the segregated South, that my neighbors in the segregated South denied me the rights that were recognized by the Constitution. I love it because of its great and noble ideals: liberty and justice for all, government of the people, by the people, for the people. I love my country. And because I love my country, I believe that we cannot continue to avoid the seminal sin of my country, the seminal sin that dates back to, according to a good many people, 1619, when the first persons of African ancestry landed on these shores. There are others who would debate the date, but for our purposes today, let's just use 1619. And that seminal sin has shaped the history of Africans in the Americas. That seminal sin, of course, was slavery. That seminal sin has metamorphosed over the years into other forms of invidious discrimination. It has become a part of the culture. And I, as a son of the segregated South who loves his country, have been on a mission since I arrived in Congress to eliminate totally invidious discrimination. I want to eliminate it because I know the harm that it does to people. And I know how it impacts children. I want to eliminate it, which is why I brought those articles of impeachment before the House and why we had the votes. I had the good sense to know, to be very candid with you, that if I had asked for permission, it would never have been done. Because we have found a way to tolerate invidious discrimination. We who hold public trust in some of the highest offices in the land have found a way to tolerate it. Very much akin to what Dr. King called to our attention in his letter from the Birmingham jail. But his letter from the Birmingham jail, as significant as it is not more significant than the people he referred to in the letter that caused him to write the letter from the Birmingham jail. Because these were some of the most successful, the most recognized, the persons who were held in high esteem in the community. And they wrote Dr. King in a very pejorative way, concluding that he should not come because he would be an outside agitator. You should read the letter that caused Dr. King to write the letter from the Birmingham jail. This is what's happening in our country currently. People who hold high office are willing to tolerate invidious discrimination. Fortunately for us in the House, we did get 95 people to vote to take on the president's bigotry. By the way, I have no problem saying to you or anyone else that the president is a beneficial bigot. The president uses his bigotry to reward and to punish. And he has rewarded people such that many people are doing things that I never thought I'd see them do. But this resolution, the last one that received 95 votes in the House, this resolution laid the foundation for the eventual impeachment of the president. But I regret, and I will go to my grave regretting, that we did not impeach him for his bigotry. It would have made a profound difference in this country if we had impeached him for his bigotry, for his xenophobia, his Islamophobia, his homophobia, all of the invidious phobias, for his anti-Semitism, for finding some fine people among those who were screaming blood and soil. Jews will not replace us in Charlottesville. He should have been impeached for his bigotry. It would have changed the course of history in this country, in my opinion. Well, we didn't. But there are other things that we can do currently, and I'll just mention two, and thank you for allowing me to be with you. There are two things that I propose. And I, by the way, will continue to propose things that will challenge us to do the righteous thing. One thing that I propose is a Department of Reconciliation. It is HRES 992, a Department of Reconciliation. We have not reconciled in this country. We were close to doing something about it in 1868 when Andrew Johnson succeeded President Lincoln. And Andrew Johnson chose not to do anything about it. In fact, he did not want to move forward with a Department of Reconciliation. It wasn't called that, but he did not want to reconcile. He supported white supremacy. Well, this Department of Reconciliation would give us a full-time person, a Secretary of Reconciliation, very much to akin to the Secretary of Labor and the various other secretaries, who would have it as a full-time job, that of eliminating invidious discrimination in all of its forms as it relates to the protected classes, not just for Black people, but all of the protected classes, and continuing to prevent it from rearing its ugly head once we've eliminated it. I happen to believe that we can. Department of Reconciliation, and I believe that this is something that we should do in the House. This is a resolution calling for it. Very, 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 very righteous thing to do. But I assure you, it is not an easy thing for many people to sign on to. Next, I have a resolution, Resolution 1092. This resolution deals with the naming of the Russell Office Building. Many people are not aware that Senator Russell was one of the biggest bigots of his time. Senator Russell was a white supremacist. He acknowledged himself as a white supremacist. We now have a building that tax dollars are supporting that is named after a racist white supremacist. I assure you, this should not continue. And this resolution calls on the Senate to remove his name and accept the name again that was there before his name was placed on it. It was called the Old Senate Office Building. Revert back to the Old Senate Office Building and then name it after someone else. But it should not have been and should not continue to be named after Senator Richard Russell. You'll be amazed at how difficult it is for people to sign on to a resolution to take a racist name off of a building that taxpayers support, where legislation is generated for the United States of America. It can make people very uncomfortable to even talk about these things. But these are the things that we have to discuss, because if we don't discuss them, we will find ourselves in the next century talking about racism and invidious discrimination. I'll close with this. I've lived a life that has been very comfortable for me, but I didn't start out in comfort. Just share this brief vignette with you. I went to work with my father one day. My father was a mechanic's helper. In fact, he did whatever he was told. I was a young lad. If they said, clean up that grease spot, he'd have to do it. If they said, take care of the toilets, he'd have to do it. And they called my father secretary. That wasn't his name. They called him secretary. So I said to my father, why are they calling you secretary? And my father was very candid with me. He said, they know that I can't read and I can't write, so they're making fun of me. Well, you can imagine how a young person feels. Your father is a superhero, and you don't want people making fun of your father. So I said to my father, well, why do you let them do this? Why do you let them disrespect you? Not in these exact words, because I was very young. And he said, I do it because I love you and because I want you to get an education. And I say to people, to have a father that was called secretary, his name was Alec, called secretary, who would make such a sacrifice, be disrespected, so that his young son could get an education. Isn't it wonderful to live in a country where the son of a secretary can stand in the well of the House of Representatives and read and write laws for the United States of America? I love my country. I thank you for allowing me to share a few thoughts with you. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. I love my country.
Oh, Congressman, you know, you were saying pushing the envelope sometimes first before others get on board. I think we would all agree that's what leadership is. And I learned and wrote down some of the resolutions you mentioned that I hadn't.
So did I.
So thank you for pushing that envelope. Thank you for being willing to be first to start these conversations. You have allies in us in Colorado. It's been an amazing honor to have you join our delegation. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Have a beautiful convention week and on the path to justice. Let's do this.
Thank you, Congressman. I heard you speak at the NCRC about 2 years ago when I was on the Hill. And since then, I have been trying to get you in front of Colorado. So thank you so much. Thank you, Crystal, for making that happen.
Yay, Crystal. Thank
Crystal's
you.
right here. Wave, Crystal. Come on over.
Thank you.
Hi.
We have to mask up. I'm sorry. We're too close to each other, Crystal.
There we go. And a huge thank you to Halisi for all of your work in helping pull together an amazing morning program with inspiring speakers. Huge thanks for your work and for everyone who's been joining us. I want to introduce you to some of Colorado's Biden team next. Every state has different staff. Colorado is a battleground state, and I think you will recognize